your state. We have an illustrious list of speakers today who are pioneers in their own right. They are John Bolton, Dr. David Adler, Scott Morland, Dan Evans, Peter Vasiliou, and on behalf of Dr. Daniel Nalaya and Nick Folks. We now are going to sing our Australian national anthem. Are you ready? Yes! You have to do this without music. Okay? Australians, all let us rejoice, for we are young and free. With golden sun and wealth and time, our home is set by sea. Our land abounds with grace, our beauty rich and rare. In history's page let every state our chance Australia fair. In joyful strength and let us see advance Australia fair.
And we're on! Okay, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our first speaker. His name is John Bolton. John is a barrister and solicitor, a political activist and commentator, and makes submissions to federal, state and local government. John works on improving child protection, domestic violence, firearms law, and the right to self-defence, freedom of speech, Aboriginal equity, and preventing the Islamisation of Australia. His blog page is John Bolton Independent Observer. His Facebook page is called John Bolton Australian Law First. John openly states that he is anti-Islam but does not support any campaign against the ordinary Australian who lives within our laws and who also identifies as Muslim. He supports closing the gap specifically for the remote Aboriginal communities, but he opposes dividing Australians by the proposed racist changes to the Australian Constitution. He expresses zero tolerance for those who place Sharia law above Australian laws. Thank you. John's baseline is the paramountcy in Australia of Australia's civil and criminal law. John attended the first Reclaim rally in Adelaide and has attended and spoken at more than 25 Reclaim, Pegida, Australia First, council meetings and mosque opposition meetings and rallies in all but one Australian state. We look forward to John speaking at our first Reclaim Sydney rally today. I had the absolute pleasure of being at the Melton rally with John. We actually had to walk the gauntlet and we were threatened to be closed down. We were told there would be bombing and terror violence, but we both pressed forward. Him and many others showed fearlessness as we pressed on and actually held the rally. Please may you welcome an educated, well-versed speaker, Mr. John Bolton.
It is good to be anti-Islam. We don't want Islamic barbarity in Australia. Islam is a monoculture. It's hate-filled, it's bigoted, it's anti-women, it's sexist, it's anti-children, it's anti-freedom, and it is obnoxious to Australian civil and criminal law. I say this to Islamists: Australia will never be your country. Australia will never be an Islamic country. Every rational thinking person in Australia should vilify, insult Islam every day, 5 times a day if you have the time. Who made up the rule that I'm not allowed to criticise or vilify Islamic ideology in Australia? I didn't make up that rule. It is my right to judge Islam. It is your right to speak freely. It is our right to resist Islam in Australia. We do not want Islamic barbarity here. Not all cultures are the same, and in fact, Australian culture is better than Islamic culture. Australian rule of law is better than Islamic Sharia law. Equality of the sexes is better. Protection of minorities is better. Some things about Australian culture are just not negotiable. Free speech is not negotiable. The right to criticise Islam is not negotiable. I claim my Australian constitutional right to speak freely at this political rally, even if some people think that they're going to be hurt or offended. We have to be frank and honest in our political dialogue. If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to say things that some other people may not want to hear. This is our country. Australians have nowhere else to go. We have no place to run to. This is our home. Reclaim Australia is a dangerous group of people to our politicians because we can think things out for ourselves without regard to political correctness. Australia, our nation, was not given to us. It has taken centuries of hard work to build up. And it is a great country, number 2 in the world on the United Nations Human Development Index. Our culture, our society, our nation was not given to us, and we are not going to give it away. We have a duty to hold on to it and pass it on to our children, not to people who want to change us by terrorising us and committing murder on our streets. Australia is a country which not anyone in the world can come to, and that's a good thing. The democracies of 21st century Europe, in this 21st century, have the brutal fist of 7th century Islam, a 1400-year-old ideology, pounding down on Europeans' right to speak. Because their leaders, their politicians, opened the floodgates to a tidal wave of Islamic terror into Europe. Australian politicians who seek votes from Islamists need to be voted out. We have to show our politicians that appeasement of Islam is a vote loser. Islamic apology for terrorism is a vote loser. Being a dhimmi, an Islamic useful idiot, is a vote loser. There is no place in Australia for Sharia law. Islamists have a law that says it's okay to hit your wife. There's no place in Australia for a law like that. Islamists say it's okay to clitorectomise and butcher the private parts of little girls. There's no room for a law like that in Australia. They say it's okay to force a 6-year-old to get married and a 53-year-old man to have sex with a 9-year-old. There is no room for a law like that here in Australia. They think it's okay to give a 15-year-old boy a gun in a mosque at Parramatta to go out and shoot people. There's no room in Australia for people who even think like that. Already the Islamists are saying to our government, to the federal government inquiry, they're saying that Sharia law can live in Australia so long as Sharia is dominant. They want Section 18C to make it unlawful to even criticise Islam. It's nearly time for me to swear about that.
Go on! We want you there!
Since 2005, our government has been seeking advice on how to respond to the threat of homegrown terrorism. I say it's not homegrown if it's the firstborn children of Islamic immigrants. This is imported terrorism, not homegrown. The Australian government's review of Australia's counter-terrorism machinery now identifies that it is whole families, whole Islamic families in Australia are terrorists, and I quote from that report. There is now an intergenerational dimension with the families of known terrorists increasingly radicalised and involved. End quote. Whole families are now Islamic terrorists in Australia. That is not homegrown, it is imported terrorism, and they do exactly what they like. The National Children and Youth Law Centre identified 250 child marriages in just 12 months, and how many prosecutions have we had? The Victorian Women and Immigration Refugee Coalition sees 150 young Islamic women and girls a week who are seeking advice how to escape forced marriages here in Australia. And we've had one prosecution. Our leaders are failing us. These obnoxious things are taught and preached in mosques. Mosques are a threat to our national security. Councils, local governments and shires are not protecting us. I want the federal government to take over, using the defence power, to take over the regulation of mosques in Australia. There must be prohibited activities. There must be no preaching of violent acts of jihad, no encouragement of terrorism, no promotion of financial support, no sedition by teaching the overthrow of Australian government by terrorist Islamic jihad. All jihadis that want to leave Australia, let them go, but they must never come back. With female genital mutilation, I want the law changed. If your little girl, your 4-year-old, turns up at one of our 2 genital mutilation reversal clinics, as the mum and dad, you should be charged. It's your responsibility. You should have to prove you're innocent, not the other way around. I refuse to use the Arabic word for face masks. Right now in Europe, children are going to be forced to learn to speak Arabic to make immigrants feel welcome. In Australia, you can never fit in if you do not speak Australian English, and we can't see your face. I say ban Islamic face masks. I want more anti-terrorism powers so that our squads can do random searches of mosques. When they had to phone up the Parramatta Mosque after that murder and ask permission to search, this is madness. When was the last time a bikie gang got a telephone call asking for permission to search? I want an Islamic schools watchdog. There must be random searches of Islamic schools to make sure that they are not teaching Sharia, not teaching boys they're superior to girls, not teaching girls that they have to have their faces covered. Random search and Islamic school watchdog.
And less funding, more for the public.
They keep doing what they like. We've had 23 arrests in 9 months for jihadi acts in our own street. 600 people, so-called Australians, went overseas to fight. They must not be allowed back into our country. How can our authorities track so many people? Do not let them back in, government. If the rate of Islamification of Australia continues for the next 40 years the way that it has in the last 40 years, then we will reach 20% Islam in 40 years' time. Now, we know what happens in countries where there is 20% Islam. Sweden is now the rape capital of the world thanks to Islamic immigration. We do not want that here. I say stop Islamic immigration until those who are here obey our laws. The Quran and the Hadith are based on the life of Muhammad. He was a terrorist, a warlord, a pedophile, a sexist, a misogynist, a barbarian. We need to stand firm against that. There is no room for that in Australia. We want to preserve Australia for our children and our grandchildren, and it's okay to say Australian culture is better than Islamic culture, because as a matter of fact, that is true. When people say to me, you're anti-Islam, I go, well done, Sherlock. That's true. I am anti-Islam, but I'm not anti-Aussie Muslim. Those who have been here for a couple of 100 years, part of the furniture, put Australian law first and are a Muslim second. I'm not against them at all. I'm against these Islamic jihadis who bring their barbarity and their murderous culture to us and try to terrorise us into their way of life. If you come to Australia, you have to fit in with us, not the other way around. Our leaders are failing us right now. 250 child marriages, 1 prosecution, shows leadership failure. 2 clinics in Australia, 1 in Sydney, 1 in Melbourne, to reverse female genital mutilation, and just 1 prosecution. Leadership failure. We say yes to freedom. no to Islamic tyranny. We don't want to end up like Germany, France, England, Norway and Sweden. I'm exercising my political right to free speech here in Australia. It's protected by the Constitution. I think I have a right to ridicule someone who tells a 15-year-old boy to go out and shoot somebody and you'll get 72 virgins and go to heaven if you die in the process. I ridicule that. I say, fuck your feelings, fuck you. Thanks for having me.
Another round of applause, John Bolton! Wow, he doesn't mince words. These are educated people, speakers we've got here today. The next one, Dr. David Atla, one of the Australian academics who are opponents of Islam. He writes a private newsletter called Political Uncommon Sense. He's an active member of the Jewish community. He's formerly the second in charge of Australian Medical Association of New South Wales. Defender of democratic values, Australian values, Dr. David Adler.
Well, good afternoon, fellow deplorables. We are on a sort of a sacred site here as I look over to the Lindt Cafe there, about 50 metres away, and think of the event that has made that infamous. We do not want these events happening in our country. One of the things that happened recently, which I find absolutely mind-boggling, is after the election of President Donald J. Trump. There were protest marches. Who protested the most? Women. Now I ask this, and if someone can tell me an answer later on, bring up the sign. Bring up the sign. If someone can give me an answer later on, where are the marches against female genital mutilation? Where are the marches against the Islamic rape culture, as we have seen across Europe? Where are the marches against honour attacks and honour killings? Where are the marches against forced underage marriages? Where are the marches against wife bashings that is enshrined in the Quran, which John referred to previously? It's Surah 4.34. What are the left-wing feminists on about? Another surah that you should all read, and many people are familiar with it. I noticed someone standing next to me has brought a copy of the Bible. Can you hold it up? Who's got that? Can't spot him from here. Ah, there he is. He's holding up the Bible. Now, everyone in this country should familiarise themselves with Surah 98.6. What Surah 98.6 says, and I'll paraphrase it, is that the non-believers who are the pagans and the people of the book, who are the people of the book, the Christians and the Jews, these people shall burn in the hellfires forever. These are the vilest of creatures. Now, what sort of ideology would label the majority of people in the world, or almost the majority of people in the world, as the vilest of creatures? I know of no other religious ideology on the planet that does that. Now, I had a lot of time to prepare for this talk. One of the things that wasn't said in my introduction is that I happened to be in town having a cup of coffee, and I've had about 20 minutes notice, which is fine. And it strikes me that the accusation that groups like this are racist is complete BS. We have no problems with a whole range of groups who have contributed and built the Australian society. Who here is protesting against the Buddhists? Who here would protest against the Sikhs or other various groups? There is only one ideology which brings an intolerance and hatred for others, and it is a sin to tolerate the intolerable. Now there's a pattern. John started to allude to it. In Goulburn Supermax prison, 100% of convicted terrorists have something in common. The same common feature is in 100% of convictions for female genital mutilation in this country. The same common element is in 100% of the convictions for forced child marriage in the last few years, and that commonality is Islam. It is outrageous that we have groups, I don't know where the ferals are, they're being kept at some distance, who would defend those practices. Something that hasn't been discussed enough in our country is the cost impost of Islam. We have a massive budget deficit and we all pay taxes. Some others don't pay taxes, but I would expect the majority of people here do. And there is a pattern. It's social welfare rort. It is halal rort, which builds a cost into the grocery budget of every Australian by stealth. It is childcare rorts that have been exposed. It is education fund misappropriations, and it is billions in additional security. You just have a look at the police presence around us today, which is almost as many as the people attending here. Sometimes in the world there emerges an ideology which is totally incompatible with a liberal democratic culture, and we've seen a few in history. We've seen communism, which rose and fell. We've seen Nazism, which rose and was defeated. And today, the threat to liberal democracy is Islam, and it needs to go the same way. Radical Islam needs to go the same way as has communism, as has Nazism. It is incompatible with a liberal democracy. If an Australian Muslim wishes to abide by our laws and avail themselves of Sharia, that's fine, but to seek to impose that ideology in Australia is totally unacceptable. But there is hope, and I want to end on an optimistic point. We have seen a political movement, a social movement across the world, a reassertion of democratic values and freedoms. We saw it in Brexit, which was unexpected and not predicted by the polls. We saw it in One Nation, and I'm not a member of any political party, but that was unexpected and not predicted by the polls. And we saw it in the election of Donald Trump, and we will see it continue. And there's an explanation. There's an explanation as to why this trend is occurring. And the explanation is something that I will call political shyness. If all the media repeatedly say that your views are politically not correct, your views are not PC, and you hear it enough and enough and enough, and then a pollster comes knocking on the door or rings you on the telephone and says, what is your view? Then if you've got strength of character and courage, you will speak out and say what your view is. But for a lot of people, that's a bit confronting, and they will say they don't know, they haven't decided, or they'll pick a politically correct position, but in the privacy of the ballot box, their real views can emerge. So I want to congratulate all the people for being here. You are not just deplorables, you are also heroes. You are the ones that have come out to slay the PC voter shyness, to help people realise that there is a movement and that the will of the people will be victorious. And so I'd like to congratulate everyone for turning here, and we support Australian values. Victory to Australian democratic values. Thank you.
Thank you to Dr. Adler. Now, Dr. Adler was quoting out of the Quran. Just so everyone know, he was holding up the Bible, but Dr. Adler was quoting out of the Quran, just so we're clear. All right. We're just going to play a snippet of music and then we're going to keep going with the speakers. So, here we go. We can't be defeated. Okay, go straight into our next speaker. I'm about to introduce to you Scott Morland. He's spent 11 years as a soldier in the Australian Defence Force and toured both Iraq and East Timor. Yes, that deserves our applause. Scott is politically incorrect. He's a man on a mission who has spent years studying the complexities of Islam. He is well known for his ability to stop the left-wing media and supporters in their tracks. Yeah, you've heard your say. With his extensive knowledge of Islam and the Quran. He will win any debate, let me tell you. I've heard him. Scott is an awesome Australian and seasoned speaker who we will welcome to the Sydney rally for the first time. Scott is your typical larrikin Australian who has a wicked sense of humour but a huge heart for Australia, his wife, family. And Scott loves to remind people that he's just so handsome with his big nose. This man certainly has earned our respect and our ears. Please, can you welcome the one, the only, Mr. Scott Morland.
I don't want to stand in the sun. Bloody hell, I'm from Queensland. I'm used to the heat, but right now I'm bloody sweating like a black fella at a Ku Klux Klan meeting. Or Muhammad at a preschool. See that clown get arrested over there? I left my young fella at home. If I'd have known the circus was going to be in town, I would have brought him along. I was a bit disappointed actually on the way in here. I was expecting a few more lefties than that. But have you ever heard them call us potatoes, like on the internet and that? Anyone know what the go behind that is? Well, I don't know either, but if they call us potatoes, I reckon they're mushrooms. They live in the dark and they feed on shit. I reckon if there was about 200 of the bastards over there, you'd be lucky to find 2 brain cells and a half a testicle between the whole fucking lot of them. Oh. Sorry, I got told just before I'm not allowed to swear, so there went half of my speech. But I heard Mr. Bolton let the F-bomb go, so I was like, okay, open slatter. First of all, I really want to reiterate, I want to thank the police. Can you put your hands together, please? There's a lot of them here, and I'm pretty sure they'd much rather be doing other things like handing out speeding tickets to people like me. It pisses me off that we have to have that many police here in today's society. We are exercising our lawful right to assembly, but we can't do it because of the amount of idiots that are in our society. Typically your Greens voting, socialist friggin' morons. Now, if you have a look on the internet, right, or you just get a dictionary and you look up what fascism is, these retards say that they are against fascism. But one of the key attributes of fascism is the forcible suppression of opposing views. What the friggin' hell do you think they're doing? They're hitting us. We've got 3 common enemies when it comes to the left. We've got the media. Okay, let's start with the friggin' media, actually. They always, anyone who's got an IQ above 10 knows that they're chock-a-block full of left-wing bigots, right? Would anyone disagree with that? We do have some good media personalities out there, and a lot of them are actually coming to light right now. I'm a big fan of Paul Murray's, right-wing conservative, Andrew Bolt. And I was actually very surprised the other day, I don't know if anyone else saw this, that Mr. Joe Hildebrand, he's typically against us. He's always been against us, but even the other day, I saw a bit of a spiel from him on the internet, and I wouldn't say that he's starting to swing, but one of his quotes was, what did he say? I've been defending, these people for a very long time, and when they say stupid shit, like trying to ban criticism of Islam, it makes my job very hard. Here's a friggin' hint for you, Joe. Stop defending them. The media, the tactics that they employ, there's a lot of them. Like, for example, I'll take the first Reclaim rally, for example. all around Australia, we had 12,000 people show up to these rallies, right? About 10 or 12 neo-Nazi dickheads decided to show up down to Melbourne. Who did the media pay 100% of their attention to? Them. They didn't care about all the other 12,000 people from all different races and cultures. They focused 100% of their attention on them. They do other things, like if there's a big rally and the counter-protesting grubs are, allowed fairly close to us, which is good they're not today. If they burn the Australian flag, the report will read, an Australian flag got burnt, but they won't say who burnt the actual flag. If a knife gets confiscated off a counter-protesting grub, they'll say, oh, a knife was confiscated at a Reclaim Australia rally. And you cannot go past any headline with regards to this movement without it saying far right-wing extremist group, you know. Just little things like that they play on the public's conscience, and it's really starting to annoy me. Actually, it's been annoying me for a long time. Now, the other enemy we've got is obviously the grubs, the counter-protesting unwashed crowd, right? What do? They try to shut us down 24/7. Like, they're always on the internet. When they have the counter-protesters, they're not here to actually, offer an opposing view to what we're saying. They're here to make noise and shout us down, shout down what we're actually saying. That's it. They're trying to forcibly suppress opposing views. Social media. All of us here, the reason half of us know each other is from social media. It's a bit of a two-edged sword with Facebook. The left-wing grubs are always on there. I've been called some pretty horrific things, like a baby killer, a war criminal, simply because I served my country over in Iraq and East Timor. They don't care. They say this sort of stuff to get a reaction out of me, and me being me, I'm pretty hot-headed. I give it to them, and then they press the friggin' report button and, another 30-day ban, thanks for coming. They constantly shut down right-wing conservative pages at the drop of a hat. They've got a Facebook page which has been doing the rounds now called Diggers are Dole Bludgers, right? That's been up for a couple of years now. I remember a couple of years ago someone actually put a page up called Muslims are Dole Bludgers. It was shut down within 24 hours. And considering Muslims actually account for an unemployment rate of twice that of the average Aussies, which is nearly 13%, that at least there was a little bit of truth to that. Okay, there's some other people that I really want to thank. Anyone here, while I'm talking about social media, I brought my wife here with me today. She's been to one other rally, and I'm sure everybody else here has partners, and these idiots and these arsewives on the internet, they've got the ability to really, really wind us up. Okay, and unfortunately, it's always my wife that has to, pick up the pieces and bring me back to earth, when I would do anything to get through that frigging computer and grab these little grubs and put their head through the wall, you know what I mean? I'm sure that there's a lot of other patriots here who feel the same way. So if we can we put our hands together for the wives and the partners of all those in this movement. Now, the reason they silence the left, they always try to silence our views, is because they've got no views of their own. They've got none whatsoever. This is the way a typical argument with a leftard goes. You'll hit them with a barrage of facts, right? It goes in 5 steps. Admit nothing, deny everything, make counter-accusations, and if that doesn't work, they'll divert the topic onto something else. And number 5, when all else fails, just start chanting or start calling us names. That's the way their whole tactics work. It's pretty easy to shut down, but still. We'll use a few examples, okay? Let's talk about pedophilia within Islam. Now, anyone who's done any research into Islam whatsoever will know that the person who started Islam was a pedophile. He married a friggin' 6-year-old child. For crying out loud. And this is the person that 1.5 billion people on the planet believe to be the best example of mankind. For crying out loud. When the aid workers went into Afghanistan after the invasion, they discovered that over 60% of the girls there were already married by age 10. You can actually tell a leftard this. You know what they'll say? What about the pedophile priests? Well, it's illegal for starters. Over in a lot of Muslim countries, it's not. And if it is, it's not enforced. Then you hit them with that, and then they'll just call you a racist or bigot or some crap after that. Or we could talk about the murder rate within Islam. Since 9/11, there has been 32,000 Islamic terrorist atrocities. 32,000. That's an average of in between 5 and 8 per day. Right? Since Islam got started, there's been over 270 million murders in the name of jihad. Other religions have their extremist too. Okay. Nothing like that. Nothing that accounts for 270 million murders. Then they'll, when they talk about other religions having their extremism, and I agree, they all do. You show me one order from the Bible in the New Testament where Jesus orders Christians to kill people. You won't find it. None whatsoever. Just take an example, right? When Jesus was being arrested and he was about to be crucified, one of his disciples struck off one of the arresting officer's servant's ears. Jesus immediately rebuked him. If there was ever a time when he would want his followers to fight in his name, that would have been it. Wouldn't you agree? Didn't do it. There is one verse, it's the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19, verse 27. In context, it doesn't mean what it says. It actually says, bring all those who don't want me to reign over them and slay them before me. But if you actually read, 10 lines before it, he's telling a parable. He's telling a story about a rich man who had said this to his servants. You can tell this to the left and, they'll start calling your names and all that sort of crap. I'm sorry, when they said I wasn't allowed to swear, that went bloody, half of my speech was gone. Okay, when they've actually exhausted the 5-step process, they normally go back to step 4, which is divert the attention onto another problem that the world is facing. Nowadays, I've noticed it's actually domestic violence. I mean, what are you worried about Islam for? What about domestic violence? How many people get killed there? I'm like, no one's denying that domestic violence is a problem. Every single country in the world has a problem with domestic violence. What the fuck's that got to do with Islam? Yeah, well, we could go there, but yeah, then I'll be talking for another freaking half an hour. Now, have you ever noticed lately that Muslims aren't actually coming out opposing us? They don't really need to. They've got all the retards doing it for them. When they do come out and they get very vigorous, that's when we know we've got them on the back foot, because they don't have the clowns sticking up for them anymore. Now, can I ask you all a question? Who here would like to see Islam banned? I'm very sorry to tell you guys and girls, it ain't ever going to happen, all right? I'd love to see it banned too. I know what you're thinking. The country of Angola has had it done, but we need to be practical, okay? You're never going to be able to ban a mindset. It's a political ideology. You can ban the political aspects of it, but if someone's going to be a Muslim, they're still going to be a Muslim. Fair enough? Who would like to see the Islamic State blown off the fucking face of the planet? I would too. But at the end of the day, what's it going to achieve? In 6 months' time, there'll be another terrorist bloody group that pops up. We've had Al-Qaeda, we've got Boko Haram, we've got Hamas, we've got Hezbollah. There's nearly 100 different Islamic terrorist organisations on the planet right now. And each and every one of them, they are all competing vigorously for the International Fuckwit of the Year award. Now, it's my firm belief here that the only way we're going to tackle this issue is to confront Islam theologically. A bloke over there held up the Bible before. How many Christians have we got here? Can we get a show of hands, please? How many atheists or agnostics have we got? Quite a few. It's typically half and half within our movement, and it's good to see that we're all working together. Can I challenge the atheists to learn a little bit about the Bible? And the reason I say that is because have any of you ever tried to convert a Muslim to believing that there is no God? How'd you go? Not much luck. The only chance we have is to teach them that Muhammad was a false prophet, and you can only do that theologically. And it's actually pretty easy to do, but in saying that, it's also very hard to do. I can use the example. Has anyone ever heard of a bloke named David Burt? He's a Yank. He's in a lot of YouTube videos, wears glasses, staunch Christian apologist, anti-Islam person. Well, his best mate is actually a Muslim, or ex-Muslim I should say. Now, there is not many people on the planet of Islam's critics who know more about Islam than this bloke. And it took this guy 3 years to convert, his name's Nabil Quresh, from Islam to Christianity. But when he eventually did it, this Nabil Qureshi bloke now, he has actually converted thousands and thousands in America alone of Muslims over to Christianity. Now, the ex-Muslims, they are our staunchest asset in this movement. I've said it 1,000 times and I'll keep saying it. The media can't call them a racist, can't call them a bigot or a Nazi. The trouble is what they are doing right now, and we've got a lot of them, they're just ignoring them. It's another one of the media's tactics. What they typically do, not at this rally, but I've seen them at other rallies, they'll search around like a bunch of vultures. They won't go for the people who actually know what they're talking about. They will look for the biggest, fattest, tattoo sporting, singlet wearing, toothless, friggin' redneck they can find, and they'll go, oh yeah, I just want to hate the Muslims. And they'll use that to paint a picture of all of us. Okay, I've got a little bit more here to say, but we're a little bit pressed for time, so I'm going to try and wrap it up. I saw an interview the other day with just a random lefty over in the United States after the Donald Trump inauguration. And this guy actually said, the interviewer said to him, he goes, you know, what are you protesting against and what are you so worried about? And he turned around and said, we're worried that for the last 30 to 40 years, this guy's going to, and the right-wing movement are going to bring down everything we've been working towards. You know what? You're fucking right, we are. I've said this before and I'm going to say it again. I implore anyone who doesn't know anything about Islam to learn. And if you still don't think that there is a problem with Islam, it's not because there's no problem with Islam, it's because there's a friggin' major problem with you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for allowing me to talk today.
Mr. Scott Moreland! And can everyone please hold up their placards? Show us what you got. Let the media see it. Show the crowd it back, at the back there. Okay, there's people standing up for so many different issues, and it all falls under the same banner of patriotism. Thank you for bringing those today. I want to introduce our next speaker. Mr. Dan Evans is a married father of 3 who has organised successful Reclaim rallies and the worldwide Pegida rally in Canberra. Dan is self-employed Canberra business owner who recently ran in the ACT state election as an independent Conservative candidate. He's also known as the Australian Conservative Capitalist. Dan has been nominated as Patriot of the Year by the Unshackled and online Conservative News editorial. Sorry? You got 3rd. Oh, we think you deserve first. Okay. So it's been my honour to work with Dan at the Pegida rally on the lawns of Parliament House months ago. He's the man with a ready smile. And look, I just wanted to mention, you know, we have something in common. Dan and I ran in elections in very close proximity to each other, and we both got vandalised, or our signs got vandalised with a Nazi swastika. Now, I ain't no Nazi, okay? Just so clear. So, no, Dan, you're not either. Just so that we're clear. All right. But please welcome the man with a ready smile, Mr. Dan Evans.
Hey, Sydney! Sydney!
Yeah.
So, you know, why are we gathered here? Because of fear. Fear! No, we're here because of the fear that we're living in right now. We've been living in fear. We're sick of living in fear. We're sick of the government telling us we have to accept terrorism as part of our lives. We have to accept that. It's just, you know, you're never going to get rid of it. We have to accept that. It's part of our lives. No, we don't!
No, we don't!
We don't have to live in fear. We don't have to accept Islam, Sharia law. We don't have to cave in to left-wing Marxist ideology either. Our government thinks that being subservient will stop terrorism. I tell you what, I will not submit to inferior cultures. I will not submit to Islam. I will not submit to the communist, left-wing Marxist ideology. I will never fucking surrender, ever! I think if you already covered it, but with here of Australia, I think Australia is a superior culture. Australia is not multicultural. It's multi-ethnic.
Yes!
It's a monoculture. One culture, Australian culture.
Yes!
Superior culture.
Yes!
I think I'm out of order here, but we as Australians, we're very open and accepting. There's a little story here, I don't know if you know about the frog. You put a frog in a pot of cold water and you slowly bring it to the boil. It adjusts and acclimatises to the change in temperature. You know, just like our government's telling us, we have to adjust and acclimatise to our change, people wanting to change our culture, Islam and this Marxist ideology trying to push and change our superior culture. Like our government telling us we must accept that. What's going to happen by the time the water comes to the boil and it's too hot, the frog, you know, it's out of energy. It can't jump out. How many more people have to die before we jump out of the pot, before our government realises? You know, we just recently had some maniac, drug-induced maniac going and killing a few people down in Melbourne. You know, alright, they're saying it wasn't in Islam, it was to do with the drug-induced thing. But the thing is, bullshit, exactly. He did convert recently to Islam. If you go and look at his Facebook page, it's full of drugs. Here's a good one for our left-wing mates, that we haven't heard nothing about this Australian Christian lobby bombing in Canberra. They went quiet all of a sudden, didn't they? You know, what's going on there? They're hiding who it really was behind that. They don't want us to know the left wing are terrorists. Just the same. It's all extremism. This is a rally against extremism.
Yes.
It's not a hate rally. It's not anything. We're here because we're sick of living in fear.
The government lied to us.
Thanks. There's been many other attacks, you know, most of them unsuccessful thanks to the police. All that, you know. Yes, thanks, police. We've had an uphill battle to protect our superior culture. Superior culture, don't forget that. And our way of life. We've had fake news. All the fake news to do with. Scott touched on that. We've got a government wanting to give away our sovereignty to the United Nations. Give in to their agendas. But the tides are changing. Brexit, Trump, Pauline Hanson, the world is waking up. We're waking up. We're not going backwards, we're going forward. Jumping out of the pot of boiling water. And we will win. And like Islam and the Marxist regressives, I don't know where they got this progressive from because they're obviously regressing. Australian culture is an advanced, conservative, superior culture. I will never fucking surrender, ever! Thank you, Sydney!
Thank you! Mr. Damian, another round of applause! We have our final two speakers. Our next speaker is Mr. Peter Vasiliou. He's another representative of Rise Up Australia. Peter is a married father of one. He's a tradesman. He has a background in environmental science.
Can you hear me? Yeah! Okay. Peter Vasiliou has a background in environmental science. He has played a significant role across a number of elections for the Rise Up Australia Party as campaign manager, cameraman and media editor. Just regarding why our president's not here today, Dr. Daniel Nalaya. He has back-to-back meetings this weekend. He's not able to be present. I can assure you that Dr. Nalaya is in good health and he's fighting fit. Daniel sends me and our new speaker, Peter Vasiliou, in his stead. It is our honour to represent Dr. Nalaya, and he has made history by creating a law precedent for freedom of speech in 2007 that still holds today. And I believe it's just about to be challenged again. So I encourage those who are actually facing that to use the precedent like in 80 other court cases. Peter, what drives Peter Vasiliou? Peter would say it is his passion to help others, especially to become people of purpose. Peter believes people need to have a vision for their future. His vision is to see truth and justice prevail in the halls of the Australian Parliament. He believes retaining our Judeo-Christian heritage, Australian way of life and culture is significant and significantly important to protecting our future. Do you agree?
Yes!
Peter is honoured to be working for a politically incorrect party that has a true passion to protect the nation, Rise Up Australia. Peter's wife Melanie also strongly supports him in his action, and she also stood in the seat of Chisholm. Can you welcome Mr. Peter Vasiliou?
When that happens, you know it's going to be a good start. Beautiful. Yeah, it's good to be in the light, unlike Islam, which is in the dark. Thanks, Sonny. So, I'm the campaign manager for Rise Up Australia Party, and today I'm representing Dr. Daniel Nalaya, the President of Rise Up Australia Party. I'll be reading his speech on his behalf, and to all the Reclaim team, especially Liz, just want to give you thanks. Thank you for having us today. And most unfortunately, now I'm reading on behalf of Dr. Daniel Nalaya, I could not be with you today due to another engagement in Melbourne. My subject for today is fighting the enemy from within. This is one of our biggest challenges we are faced with. The left-wing socialist violent bigots, which includes most of the lying and almost totally left-biased media. One such enemy that we must engage. A classic example of this left-biased lying media was evident throughout the US presidential elections. The media totally predicted that Hillary Clinton would win the election. Their predictions were completely wrong, and thank God Donald Trump was elected. The impact of social media in the Fox News was immense. I call it the real news. It must be understood that most violence carried out at peaceful rallies like this are perpetuated by the leftists, the socialists who have no values in life. They constantly cause trouble at peaceful democratic rallies or demonstrations because they have nothing better to do with their lives but act as traitors in the countries they live in. Now on Islamic terror. Islamic terror attacks were something that we used to watch on TV, and they happened in other countries. It was back in 1997 when I called Australia home after living in Saudi Arabia for 2 years under Sharia law and being forced to watch beheadings. I knew that it was a matter of time before Islamic violence and terror was on the streets of Western nations. Not because Islamists were smart, but because the West was fast asleep. The 9/11 attack was a real shock awakening for the West. I'm shocked that our politicians and media are still not willing to speak out against the real source of the problem. In particular, that Islamic terror against us infidels is fully endorsed and motivated by the Quran. When I spoke out against Islam 20 years ago and said we need to wake up and be proactive against this terror, many laughed it off, but today it's not a laughing matter. As unfortunately it's now in our backyard. In Sydney and in Melbourne, several attacks have been stopped by the great work of our law enforcement, and we just want to thank them today. If we can give them a clap.
We must applaud them for this. However, there have been at least 4 successful terror attacks in Australia. Katrina Dawson and Tori Johnson, obviously just across the road at Lindt Cafe. Curtis Cheng, Parramatta Police Station. Wayne Greenhull, Minto, and the car attack in Melbourne, 5 dead, 30 injured. And this car attacker was also a Muslim. The media and the government covered it up really well. Thanks to the social media, the truth of the identity of the perpetrator, who he really was, came out. Last Tuesday, I had an urgent call to come down to the Royal Melbourne Hospital by the family of one of the victims. She was a 19-year-old girl. She was one of the victims of the car attack on Burt Street. And I said a prayer for this girl, and also another 33-year-old girl, who was also another victim. Both were very critical on life support. At that point, the doctors were planning on turning off their life support. As I entered the ICU, I saw the young girl lying unconscious, and my heart was so sad and my eyes filled with tears as I prayed for these victims. Subsequently, I thank God that the life support is not yet turned off, and both girls are still alive. I request that we now bow our heads for 30 seconds and say a short prayer for the victims and their families. Dear God, please do not let these girls nor any other victims die. Bring healing into their body, spirit and soul. We ask that they will live. Please comfort all the victims and their families. Help us to unite as a nation, to shun violence and embrace peace, love and justice. In Jesus' name, amen. And that concludes Dr. Daniel's speech. And God bless Australia. That's what he said. Furthermore, as a passionate and patriotic Aussie, this is my end of the speech. I would like to share the following observations regarding the United Nations and Islam. Today I'll be discussing the topic of the United Nations and the threat it poses to the international community due to its passivity and inaction regarding Islam. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah. Do I need to speak louder or that's good? All right, great. We all know that the drive propelling Islam into every aspect of societal structure is their religious mandate for world domination. It is He, Allah, who has sent His messenger with guidance and the religion of truth, Islam, in order for it to dominate over all other religions, even though the disbelievers hate it. And that's in the Quran at Tawbah 9:33. And my contention here is that the United Nations, through inaction, is aiding the rise of Islam in the Middle East and in the West. There are many ways this is occurring, but for the purposes of this talk, I'll focus on 4 key areas that this is occurring. So that's the United Nations aiding the rise of Islam, 4 key areas I'm going to address. Number 1, weapons, passivity and inaction. The United Nations Security Council is the body which makes decisions concerning international security. The United Nations thus should have provided security for civilians in the Middle Eastern countries affected by the rise of ISIS. The purpose of the United Nations, as written and quoted from the UN Peacekeeping Fact Sheet, is A, UN peacekeeping provides essential security and support to millions of people, as well as fragile institutions emerging from conflict, and B, peacekeepers deployed to war-torn regions where no one else is willing to go, and prevent conflict from returning or escalating. It is a well-known fact, supported by evidence, that ISIS and other Islamic rebel groups were armed by the United States of America under the Obama administration and by various other countries, including Iran. The question is, how did the United Nations prevent, put a stop to the armament of ISIS? From the article, ISIS has enough weapons to carry on fighting for 2 years, UN warns, from The Guardian. So they got enough weapons to carry on fighting for 2 years. And I quote from the article, a new report prepared for the United Nations Security Council warns that the militant group known as the Islamic State, ISIS, possesses sufficient reserves of small arms and ammunition and vehicles to wage its war in Syria and Iraq for up to 2 years. The ISIS arsenal, according to the UN assessment, includes T-55, T-72, US-manufactured Humvees, machine guns, short-range anti-aircraft artillery, and the list goes on and on. The UN Security Council is expected to take up a consideration of the report on Wednesday. I believe the UN stands for unceasing negotiation. They're always negotiating, but doing nothing. And NATO stands for no action, talk only. There have been so many opportunities for the United Nations to intervene, but they have been very passive and inactive concerning ISIS. With so many resources and so many countries and great military capabilities, why is the UN not intervening where it counts? Newly elected President Donald Trump stated this: "When do we see the United Nations solving problems?" They don't. They cause problems. If it lives up to its potential, it's a great thing. And if it doesn't, it's a waste of money. The United States, according to many news sources, will look at cutting funding to NATO and the United Nations, among other new concerns regarding its anti-Israel stance. I think the US provides about a quarter of the entire budget for the United Nations. That's a lot of money. Number two reason how the United Nations is aiding the rise of Islam is through laws and regulations. Laws and regulations. Dr. Daniel Alaya's 5-year court case. This occurred when 3 members of the Islamic Council of Victoria were present at a conference on Islam held by Mr. Alaya, who took a 52-point complaint against him. So they basically came into the meeting, took 52-point complaint against him and his conference. Most of the complaints against Mr. Alaya and his associate Daniel were regarding scripture passages quoted directly from the Quran, which were deemed offensive to the Muslims. Their own text was offensive to them. In court, Dr. Alaya explained that he merely quoted verses from the Quran and that it was his right to free speech to do so. In 2007, he won a landmark Australian legal battle in Supreme Court with the Islamic Council of Victoria for freedom of speech and the right to criticise parts of the Quran which promote hate and religious intolerance. It must be known that this piece of legislation was backed by the United Nations. Victoria happened to be the guinea pig state for the legislation. That's the religious vilification laws. It's fortunate that our right to free speech has been restored significantly since that court battle, and the religious vilification laws have been amended. We thank Dr. Alaya for that. We thank him for that. However, the threat to our right to freedom of speech still remains today. We have to keep standing. This is one such way the UN is directly peddling the implementation of laws and regulations which usurp the governing authority of the nation and aid the rise of Islam, especially by hindering the right for free speech. We are seeing in Europe many Islamic atrocities, but the authorities seem to have their hands tied. Political correctness has gone mad and is coming straight from the UN, the House of United Nonsense. Number 3 reason why the United Nations is aiding the rise of Islam. The Human Rights Commissioner of the United Nations is a Muslim. Yeah. It's remarkable that the current United Nations Human Rights Commissioner is a Muslim named Zaid Rad al-Hussein. It's a mouthful, that name. He is the first Muslim to hold the office as High Commissioner. To say this was a conflict of interest is an understatement. There are no human rights in fundamentalist Islam, especially for women. To have a practicing Muslim in this high office is an insult to human rights, to say the least. He is an expert, I'm sure, an expert in Sharia law. Number 4 reason why the United Nations is aiding the rise of Islam. There are approximately 50 Islamic member states with predominant Islamic populations. So 50 member states in the United Nations with predominant Islamic populations. Many of these nations endorse, enforce and facilitate Sharia law to the letter. Many of the governing bodies in these nations are ruled by Sharia law, including Iran, Saudi Arabia and Brunei, just to name a few. They practice and enforce Sharia law from a governmental level. They subjugate women and persecute religious minorities. and enforce Sharia law. In Saudi Arabia, they even conduct weekly beheadings for petty crimes and various religious violations. These are administered by the government through Sharia law, under Sharia law. Many other nations such as Iran, Afghanistan and Saudi Arabia kill gays in the streets, hang them from cranes and throw them off buildings. Christians in such nations have little to no rights and are persecuted, and many of them are beheaded for their faith. These 50 predominant Islamic nations influence the United Nations and its decision-making on a daily basis. The question is, how can such nations, which violate human rights, be given such power in the international community through the United Nations international body? Why is that? There are Muslims representing Islamic nations throughout the leadership structure of the United Nations. This is of great concern. It is quite literally Sharia by stealth. Meanwhile, these leaders peddle the agenda of Islam by appointing their fellow believers into key positions of power and influence worldwide. What happens in the United Nations affects Australia's sovereign rights. We are an independent country that should not be governed by an international body, especially an unelected international body such as the United Nations. I believe it's time to act and remove such people from such positions of power and influence before we're forced to live under Sharia law. We must rise up, stand up, wake up, rise up Australia and keep Australia free of the United nonsense. Thank you. God bless Australia.
Mr. Peter Vasiliou! How you guys going there? You hanging in there? You ready to hear our last speaker? I can't hear you! You guys really hot there in the sun? Yeah, that's Australian culture for you. Our next speaker is Nick Foulkes. Nick is a patriotic Australian who loves his people and nation and works tirelessly in defending the Australian culture. Nick is with Party for Freedom along with George Jamieson. Where's George? Where are you? Oh, there he is. Nick remembers the good old days when Australia was the lucky country. But Nick says that things have changed for the worse, unfortunately, over the past few decades. And he says, we may be down, but we are definitely not out. Nick believes patriotic Australians have a responsibility to each other in becoming grassroots political activists. Nick believes the road ahead is difficult, but together we can make Australia great again. Now, Nick is not shy of controversy. He is known to be he's known to have put on the odd burqa, or as Mr. Bolton likes to call it, the Islamic face mask. And he can often be found dressed as a sheik, or as I like to say, shabby chic. Perhaps it is satirical comedy at its best. But please, can you give a huge round of applause for our last and certainly not least of today's speakers, the larger-than-life Mr. Nick Foulkes.
Thank you, everybody. Normally I do dress up in burqas. I don't mind a bit of cross-dressing, you know. It's good to use satire because Muslims don't have any humour in their bones, so it's easy to show them up. A bit of satire is always good sort of thing. But we're here for a very important reason today about Islamic terrorism. We're not going to stop Muslim terrorism. The West, Christianity, Judaism have all been victims of this violent terrorism coming from Islam over the last 1400 years. So we're not going to defeat it. But living in Western democracies, we still have a right to vote and we still have freedom of speech up to a degree in Australia and also other countries, but we've got to exercise as much as possible. But we've got to stop Muslim immigration. You know, we can jump up and down about Muslim terrorism. We're not going to stop that. And the biggest threat that Muslims have is the sectarian violence with Sunnis and Shia fighting each other. I love it how they say it's a religion of peace, but they've been at war with each other 14 years. They've been at war with everybody for 1400 years. But in the West, we have to stop Muslim immigration. And any of our leaders, any of them that support Muslim immigration, they're traitors. They're absolute traitors. And we should not be supporting traitors at all. They are unpatriotic. Anybody who's unpatriotic doesn't deserve our vote, and we've seen the tremendous, just with Trump coming back onto the scene sort of thing, and what is possible. What many people thought before was impossible has become possible, and already in a short period of change, he's done great things for America, and there's great things that can occur in Australia too, with Paul and Hanson winning 4 Senate seats. And this is just the beginning of the patriotic movement globally. And it's a global movement. When they say, oh, what's happening in America or overseas doesn't concern us, yes it does, because our political elites, the left and the corporate elites, they all work together. It's all a cabal of deceit. They all work, they all share the same hot tub. They don't care about Australians, they don't care about Americans, Europeans, anybody in the Western world. So it's very important that, our battle will always, it's never going to be, we've always got to fight for what we believe in, but also continue on the battle and always be vigilant, because once we're not vigilant and we don't keep an eye on what's going on, the left will take advantage. And we saw last week, we were here at a Trump rally, the pro-Trump rally, celebrating Trump. It was fantastic. And we had thousands of women down here, so-called feminists, feminazis, the suffragettes. If they came back today and saw what these feminists are and what they're pushing, they would be disgusted. And I said to them, the washing machine has done more for women today than the whole feminist movement. And that's true. And that's true. The suffragettes would be absolutely disgusted. But we've got to stop Muslim immigration. We've got to keep going with this new political movement and supporting it, and protesting is fantastic, because all of you are the most patriotic institution, the people of Australia, that get out on the streets and are more than happy to show their faces and stand up for what they believe in. We don't hide ourselves behind masks. You are the best institution that we've got in Australia, the patriotic institution. We've got our government, we've got, on all levels of government, we've got our schools, we've got our universities. They're all unpatriotic. Our children are becoming unpatriotic. We are losing the national feeling of patriotism. Patriotism, love of our country, love of our people, and defending and supporting it wherever it must be is very important to the survival of the Australian people. So I really, there's been so much covered today, and the previous speakers have really covered a lot about Islam, and they did a fantastic job, so I don't want to tie you with more of that because they've covered it brilliantly. But the thing is that patriotism, we've got to teach our children the values of patriotism. We've got to instill in them the love of this country, the love of their people, fly that flag, and teach them well, and teach them very well. And it starts at the dinner table. So when you go home tonight, think about that and talk to your children or your grandchildren and connect with them over the dinner table, wherever it may be. We've got to instill pride, national pride in our children. And for you people to come today, it just goes to show you that the strong people that are here, the patriotic people, you're my brothers and sisters, and we've got to keep fighting. And it doesn't matter what other people say at the end of the day, because we love our country and we're going to continue to fight for it. I love you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Nick Burt.
Very much.
Thank you. Mr. Nick Burt.
I don't know about you, but the washing machine, I can't keep up with my laundry. So I think it's a pretty good invention though. Okay, that almost draws us to the close of our rally. Just a couple of things. I just want to say a few words myself, if I may. My brother was actually in Burke Street Mall 20 minutes before that car ran through. He was late for what he was going to back to work. He could have been killed. My auntie, she was in the city. She changed plans and she was meant to be in that same location. It just could have been any one of us. Could have been your wife, your husband, your partner, your sister, your auntie, your uncle, your grandma, your grandpa, your daughter, your son. It could have been anyone. And it just could happen again. And I just want to stand before the Lindt Cafe and I want to pay respects to them who died there, to wake us up. And we're sorry that's happened. 3 months before at Endeavour Hills Police Station, 2 police officers were attacked. That happened before Lindt Cafe. That was our first sign that there was trouble on the streets. And that Endeavour Hills suburb is in the ward that I was elected to oversee. So it could happen in your turf, could happen here again. So we must not take today with a grain of salt. We must take it seriously. And we must look at this crowd and say, it doesn't matter about the numbers. The strength that can rise from any one of you and all of you. It just takes one voice in your sphere of influence. One voice to turn the tide. Look at what Pauline Hanson has done. Look at what Donald Trump has done. There is a worldwide global revolution to change the powers that be. Are you with it? Then use your vote. Stand for those positions. Be serious. Put it behind. Put your voice behind it. And being here today, amazing. I want to give my deep condolences to the families who lost those 5 family members in Melbourne and are still clinging to life as we speak. I just want to acknowledge a few people today as we close. Acknowledge the various patriot groups that are present today, and not all of them got to speak today.
I acknowledge our speakers, organisers, the police and the media. Police, can you please give a round of applause for the police? Thank you. So just a couple more things. Now, it doesn't happen just happen today. Liz and the Reclaim team have asked that we pass a bucket around and collect donations to pay for today, hiring speakers, that sort of thing. So if you could get out some money and just, I think she's going to pass something around. I don't get a cent. I do everything volunteer here. I'm happy to, I really do. So, last couple of things before we want to actually range the crowd here for photos so that, you know, we can get a photo, the media can get a photo of the group. So if you can do that, but just a couple more things. When you leave the rally, if you can exit through this point here at the top, it just means that you can exit more peacefully and safely, and makes the police officers' jobs a lot easier if you can do that. I'm going to try to sneak a coffee at the Lindt Cafe, so if you want to join me. But Dan wanted you to join him at the pub, but I'll take a coffee. But again, thank you very much for the organisers. Liz, what an amazing job you do, and she collated all the speakers. You guys for taking your time out on a Sunday to come. It's not always easy, but thank you. You've got to keep the movement going. So please, if we can assemble here for a photo, we'd really love it. Liz, are we passing around? They are good.
Please, where's the bucket? Where's the bucket? Where's the bucket?
Maybe if James could come here, and then they could all come to you. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Thank you for coming to the rally against terror. Thank you.
To justify the prophecy will justify sin, so we sing.
Tune in tomorrow. Same bat time, same bat channel. Bye for now.